In today's session, we'll be discussing the preparation for an online meeting as the meeting organizer. We'll be starting off in the ISO portal. As a reminder, everyone must log in to access ISO documents. Carl and Val will be talking about the working group experiences at the ISO level.
Well, thank you, Nathan. I'm Carl Klotzbeck. I'm with CNH Industrial, and I'll be working with Valerie Newkirk from John Deere. I served as project leader and convener for ISO TC23 SC14 Working Group 1, and Valerie serves as the secretary for the same committee. We're going to be using the example of revising ISO 11684 as many different aspects of preparing for the meeting or experience for this project. This was a long, outdated document, but has been used extensively in industry. For reference, the document is currently at CD stage as indicated by the timeline. To begin with, a new work item proposal, or NWIP, was submitted, and although the project was approved, there were well over 100 comments. The type of technical comments received range from clarification of definitions to organization of content and updating figures to adding provisions for electronic delivery of safety messages, a technology that had emerged since the original publication of this standard. It's very important to have a wide range of technical subject matter experts and that a number of different countries are involved with the process of reviewing comments and providing input and feedback to improve the quality of the standard.
Thanks, Carl. Hello, everyone. I'm Valerie Newkirk with John Deere, and I'm serving as the working group secretary for the revision of ISO 11684. This is my first experience as a working group secretary, and as you can imagine, it has provided many opportunities to learn best practices. Having a good set of documents ready for the working group in advance will ensure that the meeting is conducted efficiently. A critical document for the working group is a well-prepared agenda that includes all of the relevant topics for discussion and proposed expected outcomes and further actions. The ISO Code of Conduct is an essential element in all working group agendas. When several comments are submitted, especially with a newer draft, reorganizing comments that are similar in scope can be an efficiency-improving method. Sometimes comments from different national bodies may have the same concept, but are expressed in a different manner or may contain ideas or proposals that might lead to a better resolution of the comment. Once the comments were addressed, they were then put back in numerical order, the same order that the working group participants would have received them originally.
With the comments reorganization work that Valerie performed, three major common themes affecting the composition of the revision for ISO 11684 were identified. One being providing up-to-date and accurate definitions of terms used throughout the document. The second being updating figures and ensuring any specifics in the definitions were accurately expressed in the main body text and illustrated in the figures. And the third being agreement on the logical ordering of content to improve readability of the standard. One very useful exercise to consider is for the project leader and secretary to prepare preliminary responses to comments. If a comment is editorial in nature or a very obvious comment with clear proposal is made, the project leader has the opportunity to suggest that the working group accept without prolonged discussion. Where proposals are not fully clear or could be contentious, then the project leader can mark for additional discussion or request for more clear proposals. Preparing preliminary responses does take time prior to the working group meeting, but can save time during the meeting.
Another useful tool for working group participants is the working group consultation. In the case of ISO 11684, A working group consultation ballot was prepared as a process check to make sure that the working group agreed that all the comments had been addressed appropriately before preparing the next CD draft and the second CD ballot. Working group consultation ballots are also useful for resolving issues or reviewing proposals outside of the scheduled meeting time so as to not consume valuable time during the meeting. Here we have an example of a working group consultation ballot. Specific questions and type of answer formats provide a lot of flexibility for creating the consultation. The working group consultation should not be confused with the committee internal ballot, also referred to as the CIB process, where documents are being reviewed and responses are expressed on the ISO comment template format. After the working group consultation ballot has closed, the positions of the participants who responded and their respective comments are made available to the working group leadership.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and pause here for a brief question and answer session. So again, if anyone in the audience has any questions, please submit those using the question and answer tool. We can start off with a couple. Val, you talked a little bit about the ISO agenda and working through, being new to the position. Is there a template for the ISO agenda that you were able to use so that you knew what to put on?
No, there is not. I did have the benefit of someone sharing a template that they created and had been using in their meetings in the past. So it's pretty much up to the individual working groups how they want to present their meeting agendas. Some are very formal, some are very casual, and you just really need to create one that works best for the working group.
All right, great. And also another question for Val, you talked through working group consultations. What's your guidance on when to use the working group consultation?
Well, in the case of the 11684, it was a massive overhaul and reorganization. And really to get everybody on the same page and to the point where we all agreed that, yes, we're ready to move on to the next step. It's a very good quality check, especially on large, complicated projects, to do that process check before you move on to the next ballot stage or next stage of the process.
Okay. And Carl, when reviewing the comments, did you always write up preliminary responses to bring to the next working group? And the second follow-up question to that is, will you continue this process when meetings go back to in-person?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, doing things virtually kind of forced that a little bit to make the virtual meetings go a little bit more quickly and efficiently. But I think it's a good practice anyway, is that it kind of shows that, you've thought about somebody's comment and taken some action. If it's an editorial type comment, we can fix the spelling, grammar, and punctuation things pretty quick offline and use the working group time to discuss, technical matters. So I would say use that tool regardless, just so you're better prepared, even in face-to-face meetings, so that you don't spend a lot of time, on the editorial type comments. Sometimes an editorial comment may be listed that way and it ends up being technical. And so that's another good reason for the project leader and the secretary to have a good look before sending those documents out. But it does help the participants prepare.
Okay, and a question came in here. How is a direct conflict of a technical nature regarding the comments resolved? Is it a majority vote, or must it be a consensus or a unanimous decision? Carl, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I was involved in one about 10 years ago, I believe it was in Switzerland for the SC3 plenary, and we had a working group session on a particular standard, and the secretary at that time for SC3 took a vote, and it was one country, one vote, which was the ISO process, even though we were in a working group format. So that's, I like that method, one country, one vote, because that's ISO. And yes, that can happen where you don't get agreement. But that was face to face. And that's the beauty of the working group consultation that Valerie was talking about, and she may have more on that, but that is a good tool to use.
Okay. And another one came in. So one observation on reordering comments by subject matter is that it can become difficult to process comments that are based on or refer to other previous comments because they are no longer in the original order. Did you guys run into any of this, either Carl or Val, as you were, processing the comments by subject matter?
Well, that was the reason with the 11684, it happened to be on terms and definitions that was creating a lot of comments throughout the body of the document. And so we sorted them, like say with the terms and definitions, we got that all straightened out, corrected it all throughout. And so if we corrected it in, say, US 001, any of the applicable stuff, we would have just put C US 001. We tried to make sure that we did subject matter blocks, like taking care of the terms and definitions that were creating the issues. Then we went to any pictorials or graphics. Then there were some other technical areas that we were able to group a bunch together. So we made that way we were able to streamline the working groups a little bit more and focus on the one area that was causing the most issue, which were terms and definitions, and then move on to the subsequent areas. And then it just takes a second to sort it right back. But I agree with the comment. It can create some confusion, but you just have to be diligent in documenting that in the project manager's comments. See US whatever number it happens to be that specifically applies to whatever you're addressing at the time, and it was easier to address in subject matter blocks.
And the beauty of what Valerie did in this particular case, it did help organize our thinking for addressing certain sections and definitions and terms. What was one huge area that impacted the whole standard, and to be fair, it was a 26-year-old standard at the time, and some the terms and definitions were outdated or misused or redefined over time, whatever the case may be. But as Valerie said, the beauty of it is once we were able to group the comments and solve, them in blocks, then she could put the comments back into numerical order. And then when we put the document out, we had both sets out there, the comments by type of comment or section, and then the comments in numerical order. So both documents were out there.
All right, great information. Appreciate that, Carl and Val. And I'm not seeing any other open questions right now. Again, just for folks who are on the webinar, feel free, if there's anything from this section that maybe pops up in the future, feel free to throw that question in. We can certainly circle back around and get that answered for you.
Hello, my name is Adam Barlow with John Deere, and I am also an active member in ISO working groups and technical committees. I would like to briefly discuss how to set up virtual meetings using the ISO Zoom functions. As discussed and shown in previous slides, navigating through the ISO portal website and selecting The meeting soft key will open up a tab showing ongoing and upcoming ISO meetings that you may be involved with. This section allows you to view, modify, register, and create new meetings. How to set up an ISO Zoom meeting. As convener, secretary, or working group team member, one of the first steps is to notify other working group members of an upcoming meeting. Utilize scheduling tools, for example, the doodle poll. Select appropriate times for all members. Schedule multiple meetings if necessary in advance, as there is a required 4-week window from the time of scheduling to meeting time. This is to allow members to register. First step would be to notify working group or team members of an upcoming meeting. The best approach to accomplish this is utilizing the ISO Forums website and writing an email to all members. There is a secretary member list tab that then allows you to email your entire working group or committee. In this email, ask for people to provide their schedules during the selected dates for the meeting. This will help find an appropriate time to meet. By gathering team member schedules first will then ensure you can find a time to fit most people's schedule. For example, using the free doodle poll website is a popular, easy, and user-friendly tool to use. When working group members fill out the poll for times they are available, the doodle website will notify you as the poll creator. After a few days of polling, you can then use the tool to select the best times to fit most schedules. Important to remember different time zones, especially for an international meeting. Again, remember once you schedule a meeting, you will need at least 4 weeks to allow for registration. After meeting times have been selected, it is time to create the meeting. Using the ISO Meetings portal, select the plus sign for meeting creation. Next, select the date and time from the drop-down menus. There are multiple day selection options as well. Once you have the correct dates and times, select Next in the lower right-hand side of the screen. Then select your specific committee that is holding the meeting, and then again, select Next. Selecting the location for the meeting. In these current circumstances, the only option is to hold the meetings virtually via Zoom. This website now provides the URL link to Zoom directly on the page. However, you will have to have already created an ISO Zoom account. If at this point you do not have an account, you will need to request one through ISO at webconferencing@iso.org. Next, select the time zone, then select Create. Now your meeting has officially been created and will show up on the ISO portal. The system will then notify other members of the committee or working group of the meeting creation and allow them to go in and register for the meeting. You can track progress along the top of the page and also open up the attendee tab to see who is and is not registered. You can then also notify members again with reminders to register through the ISO forum site, as we discussed previously.
Hi, Jean Walsh here with ASABE Standard Staff. When meeting in person, you have the option of side conversations to gather information from your team. Meeting virtually should have the same feel and connection. This can easily be done by having one of your team experts initiate a call that coincides with the ISO Zoom call using a different platform. Everyone signs into the Zoom meeting first, then they sign into the side platform. Select Mute for the side platform, or the host can select Mute All. Open the chat to use for your communications. This helps to mitigate issues with the computer mic as it recognizes the Zoom platform as primary. Do be sure that you aren't on an open mic on either platform if taking a phone call or talking to others in the room. There are many platforms that work for this side chat, both paid and free services. If your company has an account you can use, that's probably the best. Microsoft Teams, Skype, WebEx, or GoToMeeting are good options. It is best to have a test meeting with your team first so everyone can become familiar with the platform layout in case it's new to them. Having a Zoom meeting opened at the same time will mimic the international call. As an added hint, when in-person meetings are scheduled again, use this virtual connection to connect with the others in the room or those attending remotely to keep your team as a united voice, provided you have an internet connection. ANSI provides a wealth of information on their SharePoint site, linked here. You can bookmark this and go back to search through it when you have some time. You'll find not only the most recent version of the directives, but also specific guidance for participating in meetings as a working group member or a convener as an example. Use the search box to find specific information.
All right, that brings us to our next question and answer session. I do want to remind folks, if you missed it at the beginning, there will be a sheet sent out with the links from the presentation that will be made available. That'll be sent out along with the recording link for the video here today. So Adam, question for you on setting up meetings. It seems when you try to create a meeting, it will always be difficult for some participants. How have you chosen the best time for a meeting in regard to time zones? For example, the number of participants in a certain location, or topics that need to be discussed, those types of items. What have you used in the past to best align the schedules?
Yeah, good question. Obviously, who's involved in the committee or the working group is probably how you best make that decision. If it's a lot of European folks, we tend, because most of my meetings that I've helped conduct, a lot of it is the European engagement, and so we tend to obviously schedule in the morning for the U.S., which would be mid-afternoon for folks in Europe. So I take that into account. We have had some that have been much earlier to try to fit folks from Southeast Asian countries or India. But for the most part, between 7 and 8 a.m. Central Time is when we've scheduled most of our meetings.
All right, thanks, Adam. Another question that came in is for getting into forums and creating the Zoom meeting, how does that process work?
So the forum site is, I believe it is a separate, I think you can get to it through the ISO portal. It was the old site is where I was going before the portal was created. So if you just go to the normal ISO.org site, I believe that's what pops up first, and then you can go into the portal from there. And so when you get into that, if you are a convener or a chair of a committee, you will have all your committees appear, and so you just find the one that you need to schedule a meeting for, and select that. And then at the bottom again, there's an email list of all the members, and so that is how I normally reach out to everybody that's engaged in that committee. I believe you can also do it through the ASABE site as well.
All right.
This is Jean from ASABE. Just a note for clarification, as Adam said, the access to creating meetings or uploading documents is limited to chairs, conveners, and secretary support. So a regular working group member will be able to access documents, but they can't set up meetings or upload official documents simply because of the restrictions that are placed. You have to have special permissions for that. So I just wanted to note that for people.
And to that point, Jean, it's, anybody that's on this session this afternoon don't hesitate to reach out to a project leader or a committee secretary if there's some topic that you feel needs some additional outside discussion or something you'd like to draw some more people into, and you think it's worth a meeting. Don't hesitate to contact the people that do have the permissions, and a decision can be made to call the meeting and follow the protocol that Adam outlined.
I guess a question to the panelists here. Not sure who wants to jump in on this one, but can work on a standard be done outside of an official ISO working group meeting?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of collaboration goes on outside. And take a larger organization like CNH Industrial, and Deere would be very similar, and others, of course, where you have multiple locations in different countries, and even between North America and Europe, there can be differences of opinions, and trying to get alignment and better understanding of a concept that may be in a standard. It's also if you're trying to get some alignment from colleagues with other organizations in different parts of the world on particular topics, there are a number of side conversations, but where it really counts is then when you get back into the working group and you're working with documents and maintaining that kind of transparency for the final work. But yes, there can be some outside conversations.
Yeah, I think that's good, Carl. I was going to add to, sometimes there, as an example, there might be test work to go with it. I know we had an agitation standard where we had a lot of test work where we had to kind of prepare, what should be in the standard. So a lot of that was with folks that weren't on the working group. But to your point, Carl, I think it is important that when it comes to the draft itself of the standard and addressing the comments, that you do have the folks from the working group involved in that piece of it.
Very good. I don't see any other questions coming in, so get us going into the next section.
So far, we've been looking at the ISO portal from the viewpoint of a convener or secretary support role. Now we'll look at how to access information and use the portal from a participant viewpoint. The first step in joining a working group is to request to join the U.S. Mirror Committee, or TAG as ANSI refers to it, through ASABE if you're not currently a member. You should then notify the chair of your interest. When reviewing a new work item proposal document, there's also a question on the ballot regarding your interest in working on the project if approved. Select Yes on the ballot if you're interested in participating, and follow up with your Mirror Committee chair. The Mirror Committee chair notifies the ASABE standard staff member administering the committee to have ANSI register you for the ISO participation. Once registered, ISO will send you login credentials. It is important to bookmark these as they are your keys to the kingdom. If lost or forgotten, ASABE staff can request a reset, but it may take some time, so don't wait until the minute you need it to make the request. Carl will explain the process for joining an ISO working group for our Canadian members.
To join an ISO working group as a representative for Canada, first you must go to the Standards Council of Canada website, scc.ca. Once you've arrived at the home page, you will click on the link to Standards, which is on the top bar. Once you've opened the home page to Standards Council of Canada, select the Standards tab on the top bar, and you'll see a drop-down. Select the Participate in Standards Development. So once you've arrived at the Participate in Standards Development page, then select Participate in Technical Committees. Once you've arrived at Participate in Committees page, you'll see information how to get involved in standardization. If you know the specific committee you want to participate in, enter the committee reference in the box illustrated here. For example, if you're working on ISO 11684, you want to join ISO TC23 SC14. There is a syntax that has to be followed. It's ISO/TC space 23/SC space 14. Click on that reference and that will take you to the SC14 page. As you can see, ISO TC23 SC14 is dealing with operator controls, operator symbols, and other displays, operators manuals. That's the title of the committee. So the application process is you fill out the information on the online form. You must also submit a resume and a cover letter. They don't have to be terribly lengthy, but they are required for the vetting process to join SC14 for Canada. Then hit the submit.
Now that you are a working group member, you'll need to register yourself for any working group meetings. This process is the same whether a Canadian or US expert on an ISO working group. You will first go to the ISO portal and log in with your ISO credentials. Select Meetings. You'll be shown all of the working group meetings that you have access to that have been posted. Make your selection. In the upper right corner, you'll see the option to register, as you can see from my screen clips on the slide. Select Register and complete the form information, especially if an in-person meeting. Note if you need an invitation letter to request a visa for the country hosting the meeting. Select Save when you're done. Once you save and the page refreshes, you'll see that you have access to the list of other attendees. You'll also be able to access the Zoom link if it's virtual. As a working group member, you should receive email notification when a new document is posted to your working group. You can then follow the link provided to the login page. Log in with your ISO credentials and select the document showing for the zip or individual files and download. An alternate method is to go directly to the ISO portal site. This is handy if you're downloading documents that were posted previously, or if you wish to visit several working group sites for information. Once logged into the landing page, select Documents. You will be provided the listing of committees that you have access to. Select the committee you wish to access documents from. On the left menu, select Committee Documents. To view the document, select it. To download the document, check the circle next to the number, then in the upper right corner, select the download icon. You can then save the document to your computer for future reference. Using the committee structure icon on the left menu, you can then navigate to other committees you have access to and repeat the process.
All right. So some questions. Gene, start off with you. Do you have to be a member of the ASABE committee to serve in the corresponding ISO working group?
Technically, you do not, but we really highly recommend it because the way ANSI works for the US is a lot of documents come to the administrator and we put them out through the ASABE forums for the TAG members, the Mirror Committee members. If you're not listed on the Mirror Committee, you're not going to get those. If you are in a working group, you will get notification directly and have direct access, but you won't get the upper level information unless you are part of a Mirror Committee. So we do encourage that you join the Mirror Committee. And to join a mirror committee or any ASABE standards committee, you do not have to be a member of the ASABE society itself. We do have non-member participation. We just have a form that we ask you to fill out so that we have the information that we need for contact and mailing, should we need to get a hold of you, that we put in our database, just as we do with everyone else, just keep connection with you. For example, you change your email address, and if we still have a phone number or a cell phone, we can give you a call and update that information for you to keep you connected.
If I could, that's one area where those of us that represent Canadian interests, it gets a little bit confusing, and not to add to the confusion, but maybe to add some clarity. Certainly being an ASABE member and serving on the MS-23 committees and subcommittees associated with MS-23, it does help the communication channels and connecting with other members in the machinery systems, the MS-23 community. But when it comes to ISO voting and posting a national position, I really encourage my fellow Canadians to register with Standards Council of Canada. But when it comes to voting on ISO documents, we should be placing our vote through the Standards Council of Canada system and not the ASABE, and which is tied to ANSI. It's a little bit confusing at times. I can handle some of that offline with folks from Canada that have questions about that. But it's really preferable that if you are a citizen of a particular country, because it is you're looking after the interests of your country when you're placing a vote for ISO. But doing the working group meetings, you're an expert at a working group meeting. But when it comes to a national position, you should really be representing the interests of your country.
Carl has a really good point there, because it is one country, one vote. So I know there are Canadian members on a lot of our ASABE committees that work on both national and international documents. So it's a good forum for discussion, open discussion on North American concerns, but do follow up with your individual country when actually registering a vote. So I do encourage any Canadians who have questions to seek out Carl. He's our resident expert on that. And we certainly can help you if you do have questions about that. If you come to the ASABE staff, we're happy to redirect you as well.
The other thing I'd like to point out too, related to that, is ASABE now has formed the Canadian Agricultural System Standards Oversight Committee, the STC03 committee. And it is made up of both US and Canadian members. They're ASABE members, or they're people that have interest in standards that can impact Canada. So I'll put a plug in there for ASABE on that, but we're glad to take on that work, or we're glad to have that home in ASABE now to do that work. But it is truly, as Jean said, it's North American collaboration in the ASABE side of things. And then just to underscore again, when it comes to a national position, then we encourage you to work with your respective mirror committee.
In talking through, joining committees, joining working groups, who can start a standards project? Can anyone kick that off, or do you need to be a certain level within the committee or the working group?
This is Jean. Actually, anyone can come up with a project. It does need to, if the, for example, U.S. member would like to start a project, it does need to go through an approval process with the U.S. Mirror Committee, or TAG, if we have one. And some of the projects may not be associated with a Mirror Committee that ASABE is administering, in which case we might need to find out from ANSI where that Mirror Committee is located and contact them so that they're aware of it and get their support. But it could be set up through ANSI, and they will send it to ISO, and ISO, if we don't have a Mirror Committee, will designate it where they feel it goes. If the country does not have a Mirror Committee to the developing technical committee, you can't participate. Even if you submitted the idea, filled out the form, etc., if your country does not have that Mirror Committee, you can't participate. So generally, we try to keep our project submissions within the areas that we do administer.
And I may add to that too, Jean, it's important to note that when you start a new project, and I'll back up just a little bit. Yes, anybody can put forth a proposal. It takes 5 countries, 5 separate countries for a new work item project to move forward. And it can come from anywhere, but you need minimum 5 countries agreeing in principle that will say, yes, our country will support that. If you don't have 5 countries, through ISO, it's technically not considered an international standard. It might be a really good idea, or it might be a really good concept to pursue, and maybe it's just a regional standard or regional performance requirements that you're looking at to develop a standard. So if the U.S. and Canada, from either country in North America, there might be a particular issue that somebody says, yeah, we need a standard for that. We can do that through ASABE. But if you want it to be an ISO standard so it could be practiced more widely, again, minimum 5 countries to be recognized as an international standard.
And as a follow-up question, can a standards project be started at any time, or is there a certain time of year or other factors that would impact that decision on when to start it off?
As far as submittal, you could submit at any time. I think the technical committees or the subcommittees make their own decisions as to when they want to start new projects. Oftentimes, new projects are first addressed and presented at the annual plenary meetings, and the full international committee can then weigh in on whether they're interested in starting or supporting that idea before the official ballot. So there are, with the last year and a half, for example, we haven't had in-person plenaries, and the plenaries we've had online have been much shorter than we're accustomed to do. So there hasn't been a lot of discussion for new projects, and I think in that case, the ballot or recommendation may be put out to the committee to gather some input through a committee internal ballot, possibly. But from my experience, a lot of times the proposals for new projects are stacked up and presented at the plenaries, but it really depends on the committee.
Okay, great answers. Appreciate it from the panelists here. Take us into, I believe, is our last section here. Up next, we're going to talk about best practices and challenges while working virtually in the ISO environment. As mentioned previously, we're all responsible for adhering to the ISO Code of Conduct. It is used to facilitate ISO's work, which is carried out in an international, multi-stakeholder, multi-sector environment. It applies to people who choose to participate in an ISO committee, working group, or other consensus group. A suggestion for implementation of the Code of Conduct could be to include it with the meeting documentation, include it during kickoff meetings, include it on meeting agendas, or have it attached to meeting attendance lists. Meeting reports should include the details of any discussions on the Code of Conduct. And to access the Code of Conduct, you can use the link on the bottom of this slide.
Hello, my name is Travis Funseth from John Deere, and I'm going to talk on the topic of virtual meetings. Virtual meetings have a lot of benefits, but they come with some technology issues and challenges. What if some of the members are not able to log in to the meeting? I had a working group meeting that I was leading where important comments could not be discussed by the country submitting the comments because they were not able to log in. An email was sent to me from a member of that country during the meeting. In our case, we hadn't finished all the comments in that meeting and were able to give the country a chance to fully discuss in the next virtual meeting. But how should something like this be handled if there isn't another meeting planned? Well, the convener needs to make the decision on how to handle this, but with care so that the comments can be handled fairly. Maybe it is simply through an email, but if the comment is core to the technical document or contentious, it might be best, as painful as it is, to schedule another meeting. Using video in the virtual meeting can be beneficial to overcome some of the issues, such as body language. But bandwidth limitations can cause problems if everyone is using video. Suggestions include having the video at the start of the meeting and at the end of the meeting. During the call, only the people who are currently talking could use video, or perhaps everyone has the video off if it makes sense. What if the convener or secretary can't join the call? Well, ahead of time, we could set permissions settings in the virtual conference call to have someone else able to start the meeting. Once in the meeting, make someone else a co-host. If the host is dropped from the meeting, the entire meeting closes. But if there is a co-host, the meeting can continue. In addition to the technology challenges, conducting a virtual meeting can have downsides as compared to in person. It can be more difficult to read body language in a virtual meeting. Video can help, but there are still some limitations. Another issue is the lack of side conversations. When a meeting is contentious or has difficult problems to resolve, the convener can call a break as a means for specific delegates to have a side conversation to work out an issue. These conversations can be very fruitful to providing solutions or finding a middle ground. Using the private chat feature in virtual meetings can create a bridge with people in opposition. Another issue that can occur is individuals who take over the conversation. The convener or the secretary are responsible for ensuring the conversation is fair to everyone. But if the leaders are not doing well at this, members should suggest ways to have an orderly conversation, such as raising the virtual hand or limiting the time for discussions on a point. When scheduling meetings, be aware of the time zones of the members. Virtual jet lag can be worse than real jet lag, as members' awake time will be longer than what is expected when traveling. One solution is to use the ISO time planner feature for those who are scheduling the meeting, or simply consult with the members in advance. When in-person meetings are held in conjunction with a virtual meeting, it can be even more difficult. Microphones and loudspeakers have limitations and feedback issues that can make it difficult for the in-person and virtual members to hear or share. Sharing screens to a group with a projector in a room as well as virtually can also be a challenge. A suggestion to help is to set up ground rules to ensure everyone gets a chance to be heard. There are many things that ought to be considered ahead of time when conducting virtual meetings.
As everyone knows, the language of ISO meetings is English. As native English speakers, it's important to remember that participants who are not native English speakers are on the call, regardless of their fluency. It is easy to assume that the listeners understand what you're saying. Misinterpretation is easy if colloquialisms and slang words or phrases are used. Keep your words simple but clear in their meeting. Avoid trying to be humorous, as it can be misinterpreted. If you seem to be going in circles, assume that both parties are misunderstanding. It isn't just the receiver misunderstanding you. The other party may be trying to convey their interpretation of your words or ideas back to you, and you may not be picking up on it. Try to explain your idea using different words. Ask the other party to provide a different example or a picture shared on screen or in the chat. This is a good way to cool things down and have everyone step back and regroup. Once everyone has a clearer picture of what's truly being said, you can come to a cleaner and clearer understanding. As committee membership expands, so do the people participating. Especially in regards to Chinese delegates, there's often one translator showing on the meeting list with a room full of experts participating in the discussion. The picture on this slide is similar to scenes I have noticed with Chinese delegations. It is helpful to ask if any meeting participants are translators, especially if you are the facilitator. Participants need to know as well. Patience is needed. If you find that you have translators relaying the discussion, slow things down if you are facilitating the meeting. Allow time for the translation to the experts and the response from the experts. Verify understanding before moving forward. As a participant, be patient. Hopefully the translator is familiar with technical language. Another thing to keep in mind is that the American accents are very difficult for many people in other parts of the world. English is taught using British pronunciations, words, and accents. The variety of North American accents can be very confusing. Another option is to turn to the chat feature if accents are very strong or communication is lagging. Often, someone who is not confident in their spoken language skills is better at the written language. I have participated in a working group led by China that was conducted entirely by chat, as the accents and language were difficult to understand from both sides. We were very successful communicating this way, and were able to document the discussion as well. A final note as we wrap things up. Often when registering for a meeting, you'll see the link to a virtual meeting on the registration page only as the blue and underlined Zoom. Take a moment to follow that link and verify its origin before the meeting. This doesn't happen often, but for committees with strong SEN links, such as VDMA-led groups, it is often easier for the convener to use their existing SEN account when setting up a call, since that's what they're used to using. The SEN Zoom account only provides phone call-in numbers within Europe. Outside participants without the ability to connect audio with computers are excluded from speaking. I have posted here as an example what to look for in the URL or on the agenda. If you do find a SEN link, contact the organizer, either the convener or the committee manager, and request that they use an ISO account. ISO officers, conveners, committee managers, secretary, support, or chairs can request an account through the committee technical program manager. If a change is not made, contact one of the ASABE staff, and we will reach out to ANSI to make that request for you.
The first question is for Jean. If a send meeting link is used for a working group meeting, could an ASABE member go directly to ASABE staff to alert them of this rather than trying to go direct to ISO or ANSI?
You can let the ASABE staff know, but it oftentimes is good, since you would have the relationship with whoever's setting the meeting, the convener or the chair, most likely. So they will know who's asking them to make this adjustment. I've had to ask for that adjustment a couple of times myself, and the convener was very open to making the change. They just don't even think of it, and I didn't realize it until we ran into that problem with a committee where one of our U.S. members did not have that capability of joining via computer. So she was on our side chat, could hear everything, but we had to relay her messages as she typed them into us because she didn't have a call-in number. But we're happy to help.
Understood. Thanks, Jean. Question came in: for meetings of working groups like we have now, virtual, we can schedule any time of year. How often do in-person meetings happen for working groups pre-2020? Once a year, only at a plenary gathering?
I can take that. So I would say it depends on what the working group's needs are. You know, when you have a working draft, you might be meeting quite often. As you get into CD or DIS, maybe it's less frequent and only when you need to address comments. So I would say pre-2020, I mean, it might have been typical to have maybe 2 meetings a year. It does not have to be in conjunction with a plenary gathering. It can be with a plenary, but it doesn't have to be. With the virtual environment, you know, if you did an in-person meeting and you needed a 1-day or 2-day meeting, so 8 or 16 hours, depending on how you had it set up, we found with the virtual, because of the time frames globally, it's probably better to have maybe 2-hour chunks at a time. And that's just maybe a preference that we've had. So what we'll do is we'll set up a virtual meeting and we'll have 4 of them in a row in maybe the time span of 2 weeks, 2 hours apiece. So we do like from 7 to 9 is a very typical setup for a virtual more recently. But the thing is, you do have to plan even the virtual meetings 4 weeks in advance. So if you're going to do something like that, you probably should plan for, you know, however meetings you think you need or however many hours you think you need in advance.
Yeah, and I'd like to add what Travis has said there. That's certainly you're going to have more meetings at the front end where the concepts are not fully developed and the positions aren't fully developed, and it's important to keep communication going. The other thing that's kind of entered into all of this too is, and it was introduced in the last 5 years, is the ISO timeline for standards development projects. When I first started getting involved in this, and I'm not going to tell you how many years ago that was, it always seemed like, you know, these projects would drag out and maybe, you know, sometimes standard could take 5 years or more from the time that somebody had an idea to, you know, to the time it was actually published. ISO rightly understood that, you know, you don't want these things to sit around and get old, and people change and thoughts change, technology changes. So the timelines have been greatly reduced, and in fact, most projects, you know, are done within a 36-month time period. I think the ISO has even gone as far as removing the 48-month time limit for a standard to go. But generally, everything's done within 3 years' time, and can be done shorter. And some, you know, we won't go into it in this conversation, but there are some steps that can be eliminated along the line if consensus can be reached fairly quickly, and the document can move along more quickly. That's better. Yeah, there's no magic number for how many working group meetings and the frequency, but those are certainly good considerations when you're putting a standard together.
I think it's also important to have that personal contact so that the participants see each other and start to build that working relationship. For some of the more established technical committees and subcommittees, the members have worked on multiple projects over the years and know each other well. So virtual meetings are much easier because they do have those relationships. I'm part of a technical committee that is just starting. They had hoped to have an in-person meeting as introduction over the last year. And we ended up having a virtual meeting that really didn't get much done. And we're still looking for that first in-person contact for the members to start building that relationship. And realistically, I think companies are going to have a more difficult time allowing the travel that we had in the past, I think, because virtual meetings were so successful. So in that respect, I think it's up to all of us who participate to stress the importance of participating in those occasional in-person meetings to help build that relationship so we can have those hard conversations that Travis was talking about earlier.
And on that note, Jean, I know this is a question kind of for you and for Adam. There have been some recent discussions about opening things back up, allowing hybrid meetings. So can you maybe share some comments on what you guys have gone through thus far related to, coming up with a hybrid meeting plan, thinking through the technology portion of it, microphones, video, etc. As again, we've heard here, there can be difficulties with the hybrid approach.
Right. Adam, would you like to start out on that?
Yeah, I can. Something that we're in the planning stages for is hosting the SC6 plenary in the U.S. in 2022. And knowing that there's probably going to be quite a few folks that would still like to stay virtual, whether that's for travel circumstances or what have you. We know that we need to make it both user-friendly for in-person, but also for the folks that are joining virtually. So some ideas and things that we've been doing is when we try to find an area or a venue to host the meeting, it's to ensure that they have very reliable internet. Maybe there's IT or tech support available that's on site if there are any issues. Doing tests beforehand to make sure that everything will run smoothly. And then some ideas we've had is even having a Zoom call at the same time as you're holding your in-person plenary, whereas everybody would either be on a headset or have their own personal microphone. And so when it was their turn to speak at the plenary, they would actually unmute themselves and talk both directly to the people in the room, but also the folks that are on the Zoom call. And I think with the current, where we are currently with technology, that should work fairly well. And so that's kind of our idea for hosting our next in-person meeting. Jean, if you have anything else to add, please go ahead.
Yeah, one of our thoughts on that was that if everyone had their own computers, or we even had a couple of people sharing a computer with maybe a splitter for the audio, they'd be able to better see the documents that were being posted. Oftentimes when you're in a large room and documents, especially if you look at those comment documents that Carl shared, if those are posted on a screen, depending on where you are, how your eyesight is, the sharpness of the video, you might not be able to read anything, and it may be a struggle. So if you have them on your own personal computer, you can see what is being projected as well, so that those who don't have computers in front of them can see the larger screen. And as Adam said, this would also connect the people in the room, the chair and the committee manager, with those who are remote. And we're all accustomed to muting and unmuting throughout a meeting. The real key is, as Adam pointed out, is the internet connection and capability of the hosting venue. We have a venue right now that we're talking to, and they are in the process of upgrading their technology, and have basically, they said, what do you need? And we've told them that we may have 100 people who will be on not only a computer streaming a Zoom meeting, but they may also be connected with their phone. So we need a really hefty bandwidth available, and hopefully this venue is going to be able to provide that for us. Some other places that we've looked at, hotels have internet, but it may not be as strong as we need for something like this. So one of the things that we've also talked about is putting in our budget the cost of possibly having some internet boosting capability that we pay for the week that we're hosting a meeting. So this is going to be a real challenge moving forward for everyone, for the very same reason is not everyone is going to be able to travel. I think one of the pluses of having the virtual meetings over the past year is that a lot of people who have never participated in a plenary before because they couldn't travel were able to get on and listen to see what happens during a plenary. And it's a great education, which hopefully will help them become more involved down the road. But as world situations change and as technology changes, we have to try and find the solutions that work best.
Great discussion. And with that, are there any final questions from the attendees? We'll pause here for just a bit to see if anything else comes in. Okay, not seeing any other questions coming in through the Q&A. Again, appreciate everyone calling in, taking part in this webinar. Thanks again to the panelists and ASABE staff for helping to get this put together. I hope you all were able to learn something from the discussion today, and I look forward to hearing you all at the upcoming AIM event in July. And with that, have a great rest of your day. And again, please keep your eyes out for the incoming email that'll have the link to this recording as well as the links that are found in the presentation. Thanks, everyone.